Round 172.
Right.
So today we're going to be talking about why and the value of understanding why. And so if you guys want to kind of comment on that while we're doing the art check, then we'll bring your stuff into the topic portion. So how are you guys doing?
Good.
Beat.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'll talk during challenges. So cool. Should we jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, who wants to start? Should we start, just do like 10-15 seconds on physical stuff?
Sure.
Okay. I'm up to 12 pull-ups a set, but not every set. So and then I'm still doing intermittent fasting, and my weight's still fluctuating. I'm somewhere in between 176 and 182, depending on, I have no idea what, but that's where I'm at. How about you?
No luck on pull-ups, really. I'm doing like drops, basically, like flexed arm hangs, and then allowing myself to kind of do reverse pull-ups just to get those muscles built up. So that's what I'm trying right now. And then for the workout, just maintaining at added that extra 10 pounds like a couple weeks ago, and have managed to kind of maintain my set and have been feeling it, which is good. So it's kind of cool. And I noticed I gained like, I think 5 pounds. And I don't feel like I'm looking like, I don't feel like I'm adding more weight like on the stomach. So I'm thinking that might actually be like muscle, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. How about you, Scott?
Nothing much. I'm still jogging in the morning about 6 days a week, and work and doing the rowing machine. I probably did about 5 days this week, or last week or whatever. So I haven't really stepped anything up much. Just kind of continuing what I'm doing. So I haven't really done much with the diet or anything. So
cool. Okay. What have you do you want to accomplishments? I guess I started. I met with a mentor of mine on animation, and he tore apart what I did, and I kind of agreed with him, and so I've been reworking a lot of it. I had been moving the camera with no like story purpose, so it kind of turned out like kind of Michael Bay, where just everything moves for no reason. And so I'm going through kind of scene by scene and redoing the scenes, and only making camera movements when it serves the story. So I'm kind of like cutting back a little bit. I don't know. I feel kind of frustrated with it because it's feels like going backwards, but it's going to add about 2 or 3 weeks past how much I wanted to spend on it. But it'll be significantly better when it's done. So I don't have a lot to show. I've just done a handful of scenes. I'll load one while one of you guys are talking when I talk about challenges. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. So, Josh, how about you?
Well, I think that's cool, and I think that'll be worthwhile, especially considering the guy that you're getting that feedback from kind of knows his stuff. So
yeah,
I think that's actually going to be well worth it for a couple weeks to like kind of bring it to the level that it needs to be. For me, I finished the last page of Quarterly Stories, not the last, like the final page. That'd be amazing. And then let me see if I can show this. Didn't want to block everybody. But yeah, so I did this thumbnail for the next page, and I, through doing the thumbnail, realized this will be the second to last page. So
cool.
Of the first book. So I'm pretty close. I thought it would possibly be the last page, but when I tried thumbnailing it that way, it was way too crowded. So better to break it into two. Yeah, so that's what I got done, and then I got some freelance done for a client. Some revisions came in too, and on top of that, just basically like doing house stuff and things like that. And I actually had to push an anthology that I was going to do some stuff for, that I was invited to do stuff for, and I had to actually tell the editors of that I don't have the time. It was never fun, but I felt like that was more realistic than trying to kind of pile on more. Plus, that would just delay my book way more, and more delay is like the last thing I need. I don't want to spend another, year and a half or whatever. It's already almost 5 years, so kind of like it to cap at 5.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But that was interesting, and maybe we can touch on that with challenges. But,
yeah, that'll be good. Scott, how about you?
So let's see, 48 hours Sunday. I woke up early. That was the day I didn't jog because I wanted to. I ordered the screen printing machine that I had to assemble, and based on videos that I watched, the instructions are horrible, which they were. So I was kind of watching videos of other people putting it together. So I spent most of my morning putting this thing together, but I filmed a lot of it, so I may make a video out of it.
That's the rotating, like 4-color one?
Yeah, it's got four, not stations. I don't know what they're called. It's only got the one palette for a shirt. Mm-hmm. I could have got one for two with 2 palettes, but it's got 4 things that you can put the screens on. And
nice, so you can pull 4.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
So yeah, and then next I got to order some of the material and just play around with it. I don't know how much time. I think I want to get some stuff ready for Phoenix Design Week, which I believe it's like October 12th or so. I got a setup, so I want to see if I can get that done. And I also have I'm doing like a partnership with a company that has these UV lights, so I want to do this kind of UV print with UV ink that you go over it with a light and it'll reveal itself and everything. Hopefully, we'll see. So anyway, but I was assembling that thing, and then through my mastermind group, they've been pushing me to get going on my Patreon. So I've been working on Patreon, and actually I'm getting almost really close to launching it. So that's coming really soon. I've been working on the graphics, and I did a welcome video. Let's see, just coming up with all the tiers and the copy and everything for that. So I kind of had to push some things aside. But it's like Patreon, something that people have been on me. Like I remember back when Jeff and Kevin were on the show, they were like, just do it. And I waited, and I kept putting it off and everything. And so finally, like within a week, I'm just like, okay, I think it's about ready. So, I've been working on that. Did some videos. My Taking Me to Your Leader Tuesday. That'll go up tomorrow. Like I said, the video for Patreon. I was filming that video while I was doing the assembling the screen printing machine. And then I've got some like bundle deals that I'm running with some companies for some of my digital products. So I had to kind of create some artwork for that and reorganize, because they all kind of have different formats and everything like that. So that, and what else? I think that's it. I don't know. I mean, just a bunch of stuff. So
cool.
Nice.
So challenges. I'll just show you some of these things, and this might explain why I'm redoing some stuff. Like what I was doing in the past was I was trying to do like one continuous kind of floating glide cam move through the scene, rather than doing what I should have been doing, which is like individual like cutaways of things. And so you've got like stuff like that, and you've got stuff like this. And so like those little like short like 1 to 4 second establishing shots or continuity shots or kind of mood shots and things, have been a little challenging. I think what basically happened is I was trying to get it done in too short a period of time, and so I skipped steps. I skipped doing a proper animatic. I skimped on the storyboard, and so there's some of that. And then on Thursday afternoon, semester started today. Thursday afternoon, I found out that they're switching up my schedule, so I'm teaching a class I haven't taught in 3 years. So there's been a lot of crash course refreshing on that and catching up on that. And then in addition to that, just some client work that's time consuming. So it's kind of all coming at the same time, and very little of it is anything I can like push off. So it's just a big floodgate that's opened. So yeah. How about you, Josh?
So my main challenges are just juggling. We're in rush season at my work, and kind of getting over the first of like 2 major shows. And so just kind of balancing that with trying to maintain a workout and then also maintain the time spent with family. And there's a lot of stuff like around the house that needs to be done and stuff like that, typical kind of life stuff. And then also doing the graphic novel, and then doing freelance too, because the extra income doesn't hurt. Just a lot of juggling. And I kind of added one too many things to my doc. Like I had said yes to this, like I said before, like an anthology. And this weekend, actually, I really try to avoid saying no to things, but I kind of embraced the saying no to that, because it was just something where it didn't make any sense to do. It sounded fun and it would have been cool to be a part of, but there was no incentive to do it outside of, if I weren't working on my own like massive project, it would have made sense to do. But other than that, it just didn't make any sense. So that was a relief, but also a challenge, because I really don't like saying no, and I don't like letting people down and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think mainly the challenge is just trying to maintain a workflow that's reasonable and ride that line that we've always talked about, where it's like you don't want to burn out, so you're just kind of riding that line right on the edge of burnout. And it's it almost tilted. Had I not kind of taken off that one other project, I probably would have completely crashed and burnt out. So
Good.
Yeah. So that's the challenge, is just kind of figuring out what all my limits are. I still haven't quite figured that out. So
yeah, and that's always, I don't know, for people like us, it's difficult to not produce things when there's opportunity to produce stuff. Like I feel like I know it's not this way, but when I say no to stuff, I feel like I've failed somehow, like or whatever. There's kind of that little like twinge of whatever that you've got to kind of work through. But then usually it's a huge benefit, because you're not burned out, you don't crash, you don't suffer the rest of your projects or that type of thing. So I kind of understand how that's a struggle to have to turn stuff down.
Yeah.
So Scott, how about you?
So challenges, basically, because I kind of switched focus to work on this Patreon stuff, I kind of had to pivot a little bit. So I had to put aside pretty much all the digital products I was working on and everything. But that's okay, because it's like I said, this Patreon thing is something that I've been wanting to get at for years, and it basically just took, a week aside. I just had to put things aside for a week, and then I'm already kind of got to the point where I should have been a long time ago. So I'm not kicking myself for that, but so just had to just kind of shuffle things around and everything, and nothing like super. And I don't think anyone's waiting on anything in particular. I got a something going on with the doing a manga version of the Comic Maker toolkit, but I don't think there's a time on that or anything. So, but that got pushed back a little bit, and then this font that I want to launch around Halloween, but I think I can still get it out around that time, because it's kind of a creepy font. So I think I'm good. But
cool. Yeah. So as far as plans go, I've got to map out what I want to do. I've penciled in some new scenes, but I haven't. I need to like revisit my plan since I planned on finish everything on Saturday, and I technically hit that. But I guess this is the second pass. So I've just got to go through and kind of break out what I want to do for like the second pass through it of that. And then I've got to do some storyboards, and I've got to do for a client, and then I've got to kind of get ready for everything. So by Wednesday, you'll see all the scenes that I'm going to finish mapped out. I also contacted some musicians that I'm in talks with to see if I can license their music for the short, and so legal stuff and things like that as that kind of comes up. So, how about you, Josh?
Plans?
Yeah, plans.
So I am hoping to have the rough panel borders and lettering done. And then I'd like to at least hopefully be started on the first blue line for it. Although it's another crowd scene, so it might take a while.
Cool.
Yeah.
Scott, plans?
So kind of like I alluded to, get back and work on this manga toolkit thing, and also this font, and then, well, I was going to say the screen printing stuff, but I don't know that I'll get to that in the next couple days. So.
And I missed it. Are you planning on doing a video about the screen printing thing that you got?
Yeah. I don't know if it'll be the next video I do, but it won't be any. It'll basically just be showing the machine. Like I won't have time to actually try printing anything, but I want to do more videos on that. And like I said, once I get these UV lights, then I'm going to do hopefully be able to figure out how to do this UV print. So.
Yeah, I'm super interested in that machine. I was looking at them.
Yeah,
I was looking at them online the other day, and I was like, oh, I wonder which one Scott got.
Yeah, it's super cheap. I mean, for a screen printing machine, it's like $150. So I've heard screen printing people say they're not that good, but compared to what I was using, which is basically getting the sheets with the emulsion already on it, and then burning those out, and it's just basically in the sunlight, and then just masking it down without any kind of frame or anything, just on like messenger bags and stuff. This is going to be, I think, that's going to be a step up from that too. So,
does this one have aluminum?
What's that?
Does it have aluminum frames?
No, it doesn't have any frames. I'm just going to build my own frames out of wood, I get from Home Depot. It's basically it's got a rotating thing. It's got the springs.
Okay.
It's got 4 areas, and then it's got clamps, and you just put the frames in, and you clamp them down, and then you swing it around. It's got one pallet where you can put your shirt on.
Got it.
Just kind of rotate it around. But I'll show you, and I'll give a link to where you can get it and everything. So
super rad. That's
Cool.
I would recommend if you can do the investment of just using aluminum frames for your screens.
Okay.
That like most screen printing places will sell them in like pretty affordable prices, but it really is nice because it doesn't bow or bend with the amount of power washes to like retain your screen.
Okay. How do you secure the? I mean, you can't staple it. How do you? Is it like clamps on or?
Well, it's mainly for like if you're going to reuse a lot of screens. Like so, basically, like the beauty of a heavy duty thing like that is you can power wash and reuse your screens rather than have to like save every single screen. So it depends on how you're screening. If it's something you're going to be screen printing a ton of and then reusing again, then it might be better to have like a frame that's custom built.
Yeah, I'll have to see, because I might just start off with what, because honestly, I don't, at least right now, I don't sell a lot of t-shirts.
Yeah.
So, and I basically removed all the t-shirts from my site because I was paying like a lot extra for the Squarespace, the premium basically package, just because I wanted to integrate Printful. And I maybe last year, I maybe sold like like 4 shirts. So it just wasn't worth it to keep that plan.
Yeah.
And plus I want to be able to, if I can screen print them myself, then I can do the tags, and I can also, I can ship them myself, and that means I can package all the extras and stuff that I like doing, because that was the only problem, is that, especially if somebody orders a shirt and something else, then one's coming from one place, another's coming from another place. So yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Cool. I'm excited to pick both of your brains. I've been on the business side of screen printing as far as like hiring screen printers as a vendor, but I've never been on the application side where I've done it. So, but it'd be kind of interesting to get into different things once you've played with yours, in a couple months, just kind of do like a round table on a Saturday or something. And
yeah, definitely.
Kind of cool.
That. We could do that after we do the round table on the Stream Deck.
Yeah. just name a time that isn't the first week of school. So, yeah. All right. Cool thing that I've been seeing in the chat. I didn't really have time to keep up with it, but a lot of people are using the chat to kind of check in with each other on the progress of their different projects, which is really rad. So that's awesome. So great job on making stuff. We're about to jump in, and a few of you noticed this at the beginning, but I'd like to know why you guys do what you do, because we're going to be talking about why. So today's topic is the value of thinking about why, and the reason I suggested this as a topic is because a lot of times we gloss over why, and I find myself doing this a ton. It is kind of valuable to think about like the why behind something, and it's kind of anything. I think there's a dangerous area of that, of trying to use the exploration of why as avoiding like doing something. And so I'm not talking about like this weird self-exploration, or I'm going to go off and go find myself or something like that. What I'm talking about is like, just questioning why are you using that pencil? Why are you doing that thing? And a quick story that has been told a number of times, but, there's this guy that gets married, and he notices that his new wife, cuts the ends off of the roast before she puts the roast in the oven. And he just thought that was interesting. So he watched her do this, a couple roasts in a row, over the course of a few weeks. And he just asked her, he said, "Hey, honey, why are you cutting the ends off the roast?" She said, "Oh, it tastes better that way. I learned it from my mom." So he goes to his mother-in-law. He noticed that she's doing it. And he said, "Hey, I was just curious, why are you cutting the ends off the roast?" And she said, "Oh, it's a family secret. It makes the roast taste better. I learned it from my mom." So he goes to his step grandmother, I guess, and he said, "Hey, I'm just curious. What does that do, cutting the ends off the roast?" And she said, "Oh, it wouldn't fit in my oven if I didn't." and so sometimes trying to figure out. Sometimes we do things because we do them, but we haven't really thought about why we do them. And then other times, I think if you're struggling to do something, understanding why is really important. So for example, like there are certain laws that people are like, "That's just dumb. That's just stupid." Or I see this a lot with beginners in almost every different, I don't know what you'd call it, a field or application of visual communication. They always skip really important steps. and I'm guilty of this, as you guys heard already, but it's like trying to get them to sketch out their ideas or spend time concepting a good idea before they jump to execution. And they're always like, this is just dumb. This is busy work, whatever. And then every once in a while you'll get somebody that does it, and then they see the value in it, and they begin to understand why everybody sketches, why everybody does those ideas and those word maps and those lists and blackout poetry and all the things that kind of get the creative juices flowing. Like, there are reasons to do that, and it's because it works and because there's certain things. And so as I'm like teaching people how to do some of this stuff, I really try to be very intentional about explaining why I'm asking them to do certain things. And at some point, there's just a certain amount of trust that you have to grant, that this person knows what they're talking about. But I do think that at some point, a little bit later on, understanding why things are happening and why things are working can be really helpful, because after the emotion of a decision is passed, you run into this lull. And Josh and I have talked about this in depth, where, kind of the creative journey is like riding a bike up and down a series of hills. And there's like that upward kind of push. At the beginning, it's this downward slope, and everything's easy and free, and you're feeling great, and you're making stuff. And but if you wait to be struggling to understand why you're doing it, or the value of it, or the purpose of it, or what the value that it's adding to other people, or anything along those lines, then that uphill battle becomes really difficult. And oftentimes people will bail because they'll just be like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. This is dumb. And they just get out. And so I just thought it would be kind of an interesting topic, because there's a number of, and maybe we could split this into multiple episodes, but there's a number of things that you can kind of explore with the value of why.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I was thinking of that scene in Idiocracy where they keep insisting that plants need electrolytes, so they need to feed it with this like Gatorade supplement. And he's like, I'm pretty sure why we're having a famine is because we're giving the plants like Gatorade. And they're like, well, plants need Gatorade. And he's like, why do you think plants need Gatorade? Because it has electrolytes. Plants need electrolytes. And he's like, no, I think they just need water. And they're like, what, like in a toilet? Anyhow, it just goes through the circular reasoning of, well, why do they need electrolytes? Well, because that's what's in Gatorade. It's like that kind of thing of the circular reasoning where there's no actual answer to why. People just are doing a stupid thing. Anyhow, it reminds me of the roast thing you were talking about. Yeah, I mean, I think it as a creative, it really is so important to consider why you're doing what you're doing, like on a conceptual level, basically like scaled down and scaled up, like from like the point to point, just as you're doing, let's say you're writing a story or you're creating a single illustration or graphic design, you should be answering why and asking why throughout that whole process. And then it scales up like to the point of like why you're even doing what you want to do, which is a hugely important question to be able to have an answer for. So I'll kind of touch on starting with like the illustration level. Often when I was teaching students, like I would ask them why, like, you know, a lot of early illustration assignments are to try to get people to conceptually depict things, like to start using art as a visual language. Because usually at the point where people are taking foundation classes, it's very plug and play, where it's like, hey, there's a human being in front of you, draw them accurately. Or here's your homework, draw a bunch of potted plants, you know, go around, do observational sketching. There's not a lot of why involved in that process. It's just very much like point and shoot kind of mentality. And so like early illustration courses, you're taking these people, usually those come after all those foundation courses. And so you're usually taking people who have learned very much how to draw, and you're trying to now that they have like the basic vocabulary, you're trying to teach them how to construct stories visually, which is a totally different game than like, I'm just going to do a drawing. And so a lot of early illustration assignments usually have to do with like editorial illustration or very brief sequential illustration where you're supposed to narrate something. Usually the first few are like on the nose, and then like the third or fourth assignment, you'll give them something where you're supposed to be a little more ambiguous. Like you're supposed to have an aha moment with the design. And one thing I've noticed all early illustrators tend to struggle with is exactly that question of why. So, which is a hard thing to give in a critique because people always think you're being a jerk. But it's not a jerky thing to ask. Like if you draw something for a client, let's say your client's like an editorial, you're hired to do an editorial to illustrate like a really heady political thing. And you do this really on the nose illustration with arrows that point to different characters in your illustration. One arrow says like, this is the political figure it's discussing. And the political figure is eating this food, which is a metaphor for this. And you draw like these arrows, like that's the like lowest level of editorial illustration you could possibly do. What you want to do is an editorial illustration that even if it has those visual metaphors, you want it to like really quickly convey like a why, give a reason, like maybe even add a narrative to what it's illustrating. And so I think a lot of the time, like illustrators want to get to the end, like you were saying with students, where it's like they don't want to do the sketches, they don't want to do the roughs, they don't want to do all the hard long process of thinking it out. And then they get into the art of finish, and often it doesn't usually hit home for those students until they're surrounded by students who put in all that early work, who hang up something that says something. It's not a pretty drawing, but it's actually saying something. So I guess my point is, like, you know, when you create something, you should be prepared to answer why. And I would hope that your answer would be more than just because it's cool.
Yeah.
Because that's still, once again, what's cool? Like, what does cool mean to you? Like, cool is a vague answer. Like, you should be able to give specifics for why you're making what you're making.
Yeah.
At least if you're delving into visual communication, which is graphic design, illustration. If you're getting into trying to communicate visually, even if you're communicating in a more poetic way, you still got to be using the language and be able to answer kind of why. And I think if you get in the practice of that, you'll notice that the quality of your art gets better because you'll start thinking about the framing of your pieces more coherently. Like you'll think about the lighting, you'll think about all of the costume, like all of the different realms of vocabulary that you have as an artist that you can use to convey that answer to why. So if you know what you're trying to communicate, why you're trying to communicate it, then you're in a much better position to use all the tools at your disposal to communicate that why. So that's a super long-winded way kind of saying, but like so that's on the small level. On the larger, broader level, asking why is just a really good practice in life, because you're going to find yourself in moments where you're going to inevitably be forced to ask why. Like Corey was describing, it's like a lot of art, when you get going on it, is a very fast downhill kind of momentum, and it's a lot of fun, but it gets rough. And especially if you're trying to make a living doing it, you'll start going uphill. You're going to hit a lot of roadblocks. And if you don't even know what your destination is or what your purpose is or what exactly is driving you in the first place, you're not going to have a lot to fall back on if you hit a hardship. And so like a good example of that would be like, let's say you dedicate 2 years to writing a book that you don't even know why you're writing it. And then you go through that arduous process of submitting it to publishers and just getting rejection after rejection after rejection. I mean, even at the beginning of this art check, like Corey showed the animation to one of his mentors, and then there was a slight rejection there. It's not rejection. It's just like it needs to be fixed. It needs to be, you know. So Corey's got his fallback because he has a why, right? And like I think if you didn't have a why to fall back on, like that kind of thing can really destroy like an early artist. Like whereas Corey, I think you have a pretty clear why.
Yeah, and one of the mistakes that I had made that he pointed out, was that I wasn't basing the visual decisions on my why. Like I have a very specific message in that animation that I want to get across.
Yeah.
And not that you should strip everything down to bare bones, but that's a good place to start and then kind of building from there. And like Brian McDonald talks about the armature and other writers talk about the story's spine or whatever, however you want to frame it. If it doesn't serve the story and it doesn't communicate what it is that you're trying to communicate, you really need a good reason to do it.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that I didn't have a good reason for all of these crazy parallax, deep depth scenes. And it just felt very bloated and disorienting for no particular reason. And so now that I'm going through and I've been reminded of that, which I think is really a valuable little side lesson that like at no point in time in your career are you like, an island that should work alone without feedback. Like you should ask people who, for good feedback. But anyway, now that I've been reminded of that, I'm going through scene by scene and I'm thinking, okay, the overall message of this entire animated short is X.
Yeah.
So what can I do in this story to most effectively and efficiently communicate X?
Yeah.
In this particular scene? And a lot of times the answer to that question is not, oh yeah, this giant 15 layered Z-space, flying camera gimbal move. It's like, oh yeah, a close up on exactly what this shot is supposed to say.
Yeah.
That's it. And just have it be 3 seconds long and then move on. And so there's a really interesting efficiency in storytelling when you're able to do that. And if you, I think a lot of movies and books and illustrations and comics and all kinds of things miss this, where it's like, why is that happening? Why is this conversation happening? Why is this fight happening? What is this shot about?
Yeah.
And anytime you deviate from your why and storytelling, whether it be audibly or visually or sensory of any type, it becomes distracting and confusing to the viewer of that thing, because we're all hardwired to look for understanding.
Yeah, and I think we've all had moments too when you're watching a film, and this is where it comes to like story structure is so important, because sometimes you'll be watching a film or reading a book and there's something that seems like just a throwaway, like arbitrary thing in the plot. Somebody drops a pen, right? It's like an Agatha Christie novel. And then it's like, they point it out and it feels a little like, why would you point that out? That's just silly. That's a weird tangent. But then you get to the later part of the story where the pen being dropped is like the crux of like the entire plot was all hinging on that pen. So like you realize like, at least when you watch or read like a lot of masterful authors, Agatha Christie's very formulaic, and that's not an insult. She's excellent at being formulaic. Like, yeah, she kind of created the formula. But one thing that I think is great about watching something that's really well formed is you'll notice that kind of thing done over and over again, and it's almost like the comedian doing the misdirect that ends up being the punchline of the whole bit at the end. And you'll see that in comedy all the time, where somebody says a throwaway comment that gets a mild laugh, but then that comment it's going to come back. There's going to be a point where they bring that back and it hinges the whole thing together. And that structure and that's a why. Like there's a why to why they threw in that random statement. So I agree. I think like if you can come up with why early on and ask yourself that throughout the process, then you wind up with less waste, and you wind up with a much more coherent story. And even if you end up with parts that like misdirect, which is part of telling a story, there's misdirection, right? With like anyhow, I was going to make another analogy to like a magician, but it's actually true. Like in a magic trick, there's like multiple misdirects, but they're all intentional. So like every movement of the hand is thought out and pre-planned before the magician goes there. One's to like draw your eye to a different spot while something else is going on. Now, if you saw just a magician just come up and just start misdirecting all over the place and you couldn't even follow the trick, it would fall apart. The whole illusion would collapse. And you're kind of at the same risk with visual storytelling, because magicians do visual storytelling.
Right.
Kind of creepier way, but and kind of a cooler way. Magic's pretty awesome. But the point being, like, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're creating illusions, and we can really risk like people losing the whole plot if we aren't intentional and thinking about those whys throughout the process. But it's also good to have those core whys, like those bigger whys, because I've had multiple points in the over 15 years I've been doing this professionally. I've had multiple points where I've hit like a wall, and like times where early on when I was freelance full time, like the freelance dried up and there was no income, and I was like, what did I do this for? Like, why didn't I go into law, or like, go into like, like learn to be a mechanic or have like some useful skill, I've had those second guessing moments that kind of come up when you do this thing for a living. And those core fundamental whys are what kind of anchor you throughout those hardships and those hard times. So like for me, because I have a pretty solid answer of why with my graphic novel, when I've been like, wow, this is taking like 5 years now, and I have those doubts come up, I have a pretty honest answer of why, like, I'm doing it to begin with. That I pretty much had worked out before getting into it, that I can always rest on and will kind of get me through doubt, hardship as well. So that's on like the broader scale, which I think is super important, because if you're not aware of why you're doing art in the first place, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. I think.
What if your answer to that question is vague? Because I just to play devil's advocate for the sake of the conversation, and because this is my experience, when I first got into making comics, I was reading and listening to all this stuff, all these podcasts and all these articles, and everybody was saying, this is super hard. If you don't know why you're doing this or what your end goal is, just get out now. It's not worth it, or take the time to figure out why you're doing it. I still don't know why I do comics. And so I'm not sure. I know generally and vaguely that there's something about it that fills a need and that satisfies part of my personality. There's something about creation in general. Like for example, I was talking to Steve Leeper, who's an animator, and I said, hey, I feel like I should get this film into a bunch of festivals, but I don't know why. And so, like, why do people do that? And I said, I'm not going to win an Oscar. I'm not going to win an Emmy. I'm not going to win, these big giant awards. And it's unlikely that I'll get any work from it. Or if I do, it's unlikely I'll be interested in the work that comes my way. But I do feel really strongly that I should be getting into these festivals with this animated short. And so we talked about that for a minute, and there are lots of really good reasons. And I wonder what you two think. What if the reason is, I don't know, but I feel like I should, I just feel like I feel strongly that it's the thing. I mean, I could kind of BS it, and I could give you some justifications for that feeling, but the actual real reason that I'm redoing many scenes in this short to get it ready to go to these festivals and compete is because I feel like that's the move I should be making right now. And I can guess at the why, but that's not the reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it because of an impression that I've had. So I'm just curious what you guys think of the vague answer to why.
I don't know. I want to hear Scott's take on it.
I was gonna weigh in on this, but but I had something in mind, but I wasn't. But then you kind of sprung this on me. So as
Sorry.
as far as not knowing the answer, I don't know. Sometimes you just, I don't know. It's like a gut thing. Like
yeah.
I mean, there were when I decided to kind of head this direction I'm going with these digital products and making stuff for comic creators. I'm not exactly sure if my original intention was that I thought it would be profitable or whatever. I mean, I was kind of, part of it was just like, I'm watching these hand letters and stuff, and oh, that's kind of cool how they're doing this stuff. And then I'm like, well, I could probably make my own comic book fonts. And then it was just all these little things. And then I don't know, I just kind of started diving deeper into it. And then eventually it's like became this thing where, oh no, there's actually there's actually people that actually need this, there's I guess a hole in the marketplace, or these are things that people could actually use. And looking around, and I was kind of one of those things where, and I was deep into making this stuff before I kind of looked into it and noticed that there's not really other people doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many, these digital marketplaces, they're basically, they're just like flooded. I mean, there's so much stuff, but it's people doing the same stuff. And I looked on there, and for one, like, I think I even mentioned this before I launched it, that I didn't think that there was comic book creators, so many comic book creators on these marketplaces, and what would it take to kind of introduce some comic book creators to these marketplaces. But it turns out I didn't need it because they were there. It just, the product wasn't there. But it was, I don't know if I'm getting off track but it's.
No, that kind of feels a lot like my experience over the last 15 years has been, I feel like I should move in this direction. And then oftentimes the why to that becomes apparent and is revealed, sometimes really obviously, and sometimes kind of slowly, bit by bit. And then in retrospect, I look back and I'm like, that was a great move. I'm glad I spent 18 months of my life doing that thing, because it turned out really well. I got this job, or I was able to gain this particular skill set, or go down that road and know for a fact that I never want to go down that road again.
Right.
But yeah, it's just an interesting thing, that kind of instinct. But I do think that only really happens when you're immersed in something. I mean, Scott, you're able to kind of have that instinct because you're not an opportunist that's like coming into this thing sideways and just looking for like the next business thing. And you're like, oh, illustration, I'll jump in on that. Like, you live and breathe this stuff every day. And so your intuition, I believe, is informed. It might feel random, but I feel like it's informed.
Right, because naturally, I mean, you see the stuff that's successful out there with digital products, and you think, well, why don't I just do that? I could just do that kind of stuff. But then you're competing with everyone else for that. But the comic stuff is because I'm a comic creator. I like to create comics, and these are things that so I know you don't like the word passion, but until you give me another word to use, I don't know what to say. But when you do have quote passion for something, that's going to show. And I mean, it's going to be you're doing your animation because something about for me, I don't have that same attraction to the animation like you, because I look at animation, I'm like, man, there's a lot of repetitive stuff and it's a lot of work. It's just, to me, it's that I have no interest in doing that. I love watching animation. I love seeing other people, the process of other people doing it, but I would rather just hire Corey Kerr to do my animation for me, which I've done. So, and I have done animation before, but I don't enjoy it like you do. So,
Right.
but I think you have to. There has to be something in it for you, and that kind of shines through. And who knows? You may not see what the end goal is, but to you, I think it's the process. And once you once you start working, and if you love what you're doing, like I said, that's going to show through. And then I don't know. I think that's where all the great projects come from. It's the stuff that, for whatever reason, you just have to do it.
Yeah, I do think that, like, kind of that deeper calling, call it a calling, call it a muse, call it the genius, call it a natural inclination or whatever. I do think that has a lot to do with why anybody does anything. We asked people in the chats why they do what they do. And Victor said, ever since I can remember, I've loved to draw and imagine my own stories and adventures. And that's a good reason to do it. I don't think you need anything necessarily deeper than that. And Frank is saying, I love to create, whether it's making a logo, making and editing a video, drawing, I just love it. And so I'm trying to see if I missed anybody. If I've missed anybody, copy and paste your comment again. But yeah, so, and Jake's making a really good comment here. We don't have access to a good deal of reasoning that goes into our cognitive process. It happens on a really low level. We recognize instinctually that it is something, but need to tease at it for answers. And he was the one that was mentioning this 5 questions thing, the 5 whys, which I had to look up while one of you was talking because I wasn't familiar with it. But basically, it's a process of, you ask a question when there's a problem, and you ask why it happened, and then you ask why that answer happened, and you've got to dig down deeper to get to kind of a root essential cause.
Yes.
And so I kind of agree that, like, I think there's some value in that exploration. I like we've all done episodes where we talked about why we tell stories. I don't know that I had really articulated or thought about why I tell stories on such a deep level until I talked about it with Josh for an hour. And that was really helpful to understand. I don't think it changed the way I felt about anything, but it definitely changed the way how I understood my motivation and reasoning a little bit more. But it only happened because we explored that. So that's kind of an interesting process.
Yeah. I mean, I can say, like, with my comic, because I've been working on it for so long, I've had multiple times. And initially when I went into it, I really did cognizantly start asking why. And part of it was because I'd spent so much time making art where I was just kind of going with the flow and going with what I was feeling and trying to kind of beat deadlines and trying to kind of put stuff out. And I found myself with a bunch of art that I really didn't love or care about. And the only projects from the period of time where I was doing art for so long that I felt really proud of was the stuff where I really coherently had an idea of why, that I had set out with like a very clear goal and gone and achieved it and kind of had a self-authored vision, like fully realized. So when I got into this thing, I had a very clear idea of why. Like I felt like the story was really important. I feel like it's touching on a theme that not a lot of people are actually discussing in comics. Like, people don't really talk about mental illness to the level I think they should. I felt like it was a style of autobiography I haven't really seen. It kind of comes from a voice that isn't really expressed very often because it's going to discuss Christianity, but it's not like part of the whole kind of like Christian literature circle where like everybody cusses, but they like edit out the cuss words and they go, oh shoot, and like where the world's like depicted as like a cotton candy world and they're trying to paint a picture of total depravity. It's just, to me, I felt like there's kind of an importance to what I'm writing. And then the weird thing is I also realized it has value whether or not people get into it, whether or not it sells well, whether or not it gets a big publisher, because I think what it's saying is true, and I think there's a lot of value in truth. And so I've become more and more convicted that that's kind of what I like in art. I like art that kind of paints a really good picture of truth. And there's not necessarily a market for that. I mean, especially like in our country, I don't know how often people are really interested in truth. But
again, Josh, you may just not know it. Just like with what I was talking about, I didn't think that there were going to be people that were looking for this type of products on the platforms that I was releasing it on, but I was wrong. And so
no, that's cool. And there's a potential platform for it. But the neat thing about asking those whys is like, I'm going to try to find that platform, and I'll try to find that audience. And I'm super happy whenever I see friends of mine find audiences for their thing that they had a vision for. But the cool thing about asking those whys is I'm not reliant on that audience to be content with what I'm making. And that to me, I think is really important. I would like an audience, and of course I'll feel some fulfillment from it. But I feel like the project in itself will be a success if I set out and actually achieve the goals of what I had for it outside of just an audience. And I think that gives you a little bit of it gives you a little bit of strength going into something like that. Like I think Scott, like on a like it's very similar. Like you knew like what you were building was cool and unique. There wasn't really a packet like that, so it was more of a matter of like whether people found it or not. But I don't think you had like a big question in your mind as to whether the product had value.
No.
That's the reason the whys are so important, because like the value that you have when you get into those rough waters, or you have self-doubt hit like right before you click send when you're uploading all that stuff to these different design platforms where you're going to test the waters and see how it does. It's like there's those moments of worry and doubt that kind of creep up. And the nice thing about asking all those whys is it really defeats the enemy of doubt. But once again, it doesn't override doubt, because you're also asking whys along the process of creation, right? So, and part of asking why is doubt. So it's like a conundrum. But anyhow, my point is like I think more people could benefit from that kind of thing, because once again, you're going to have ups and downs in the creative industry where, the longer we're at it, you'll have things go viral. You'll have things get popular. You'll have things you really love that you put out into the world and no one cares. It's a mix. And like, if you have a solid why as to like why you're doing it, and it doesn't have to be non-ambiguous. Like a lot of what I was saying about my book, a lot of that's vague stuff. Like, what's truth, right? That's a weird, vague thing to say, right? But it's enough for me to kind of hedge my bets on a little bit, And I think that's kind of the value of asking why. The other great thing about asking why is it makes you think outside of your own perspective.
Yeah.
And so, like, Corey and I, like, we don't agree on a lot of things outside of art, but we'll have these great conversations, and a lot of them are just composed of us both asking the other person, oh, why is that?
Right.
It's like, it's fascinating to hear why. Like, it's fascinating to hear why other people have different perspectives. It's fascinating to hear why, like that's a good question to ask if you get criticism from somebody where they're like, hey, that nose looks weird. Ask them why, right? Because that's how you learn. That's how you learn how to fix the nose, I was only mentioning noses because I have a weird nose. So if I'm drawing a self-portrait and somebody's like, hey, that guy's got a weird nose. Yeah, that's inaccurate.
That's funny.
Anyhow, so I hope that kind of makes sense. But I think I really think it's a hugely valuable question. And the thing that freaks me out is when people haven't even dipped into the why question. because that's like winding up for a complete disaster.
And I think the part of this that we've talked or that we haven't mentioned yet, and maybe this is a good place to wrap because we're coming up on an hour,
100%.
is oftentimes deeply exploring why will help you decide not to do something. And usually on this show we talk a lot about reasons to do stuff, but and this sounds kind of harsh, but there are times when I'll sit down with a student and I'll say, why are you in this major? And we kind of talk through it or whatever. And if their answers are avoidance or negative, like I don't like math, or I want to do this because it's easier than X, then usually I try to say, I want you to really think about, whether or not this is for you, because, sometimes it's valuable. Like I changed my major in college 5 times, and I'm really glad that I did, because I found something that I really felt like where I belonged there. But I mean, had I just been stubborn and been like, nope, I set out to be a psychologist, so I'm going to be a psychologist, I would have a completely different life right now. I'd be spending 40 hours a week listening to people complain about their problems. And like, there are counselors out there that do that really well, and I would not. That would be a bad road for me to go down. And so because of questioning why, it's not always just giving you a reason to continue something. Sometimes it helps unveil that your reasoning to do something is a little flimsy. And I'm not talking about vague, but like, if you're like, oh, I just thought this would, I thought this would kind of get me some attention, or I thought that this would be easier than the thing that I really feel like I should be doing, or whatever. Those type of answers, like, it's good to acknowledge those so that you can stop doing something that you shouldn't be doing and do something that you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Well, any closing comments? I feel like that's a good place to stop. Got a lot more about that. A lot more out of that than I thought we would. So,
no, I mean, I think you sound like you had more to say that you might be able to break off into something else. And what I was going to go into, I think we could probably do a whole other topic with maybe 2. So
yeah, let's tease it then for next time.
So yeah, I was just thinking, we were talking about the why and everything, and I was just thinking of how basically, like when I was in college, we were just in that cusp where computers were just being introduced and they're starting to phase away the traditional media. And I remember years later, I was on an advisory board for a college, and they really wanted to know, is it worth still teaching these techniques? Is there a reason to still teach this stuff? And now with all this artisanal stuff, and you see all the hand lettering and you see the screen printing and stuff like that, I think there is value to that. So I thought maybe we can go into that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great topic. So look for that probably next Monday. Josh, where can we find your stuff?
All right, you can find my stuff at quarterlystories.com or joshuakemble.com, and that's where you can read my story about faith and mental illness. You can also go to topis.io and search for Quarterly Stories there, where I finally updated. So you can check that out. And that's the way to kind of view it if you like reading comics online through your Android or iOS devices. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. And Scott, where can we find your stuff?
You can find my stuff at circworks.com. And if anyone's interested, if you are local to the Arizona area, I will be, I think this weekend on Saturday, it's Batman Day. So I will be at Surprise Comics. I don't know the actual address, but if you just Google Surprise Comics, I'll be there. I think most of the day, doing sketches and stuff like that, celebrate Batman Day. So
cool. And you can find my stuff at CoreyKerr.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, and you are on my channel right now. So before you leave, hit that thumbs up button, because that helps trigger the algorithm and all the jazz and whatever. And if you would like to stream like we are streaming, we're using StreamYard. To do that, you can hit a little referral link down in the description of this video to go there, and they give us a kickback if you spend any money. And if you don't, there's a free version or whatever. And you can check stuff out at coreykerr.com/48hr, where we have not updated our audio podcast as recently as Josh has updated his comic. But yeah, so yeah, that's it. And if you guys have any topics that you would like us to address, leave those in the comments to this video, because we love talking about what you guys want to talk about. Keep art checking. I love that people are art checking in the chat here. And yeah, figure out the why. Maybe we'll come back again on Wednesday and get some more answers after people have explored a little bit. So if you explore that a little bit and you find a good answer, leave that in the comments of this video, and we'll kind of revisit that. And we'll see you guys in a couple days.